Hi, my name is Wednesday, and welcome to my video diving into the screenshots I took from the fourth gameplay stream by the devs over at Age of Wonders 4. Just like I've done with the past few gameplay streams, I went through and took screenshots of some of the more interesting numbers that only appeared for a few seconds so that we can look at them together and discuss them in detail. Unlike the past few streams, I have actually divided this deep dive into a couple different sections. I've moved it around so we're not just looking at these screenshots in chronological order. For example, if we did that with the packs, we would be jumping between them quite a bit or going back to that concept quite a bit. And I felt like it made sense just to look at all of the screenshots relating to relationship levels with independent cities at once. We're going to start with the screenshots relating to starting a new city, founding a city. Then we'll look at recruiting heroes. After that, we'll talk about the packs and all the different relationship levels we saw in the stream. After that, we'll talk about the magic materials and some of the modifiers that they can apply to your empire. I think we got to see a couple more than we'd had it seen in previous, I think, dev diaries and streams. Um, and after that, I just have everything else that didn't fit neatly into those other categories. For example, one I'm really excited to get to is the new starting distance that you get to choose at the beginning of the stream. It used to be you chose the map size and the number of players, but instead of that, now you choose the number of players and the starting distance. So that's pretty cool. We'll be looking at more screenshots like that after we get through the other things that I have planned. I will have timestamps below, so if for any reason you're finding a screenshot kind of boring or the topic kind of boring, you can always jump to one that I'm going to talk about later on in this video. Before we jump into our first set of screenshots, I do want to go over the fact that we are looking at screenshots from early builds of the game, which have numbers which are likely going to change before Age of Wonders 4 actually releases. And even after it releases, a lot of these numbers are likely to change, especially if they follow the development cycle they used for Age of Wonders Planetfall, where they took the feedback from the community into consideration and tried to make the game more balanced based off of their feedback. So yeah, without further ado, let's start looking at starting a new city. All right, so we actually got to see them start a outpost, which they then turned into a city in this stream. It's gonna work a bit differently than previous Age of Wonders games. I think you could spend something like influence in Age of Wonders 3 to start an outpost, and then if you settled a colonizer in the center of that, that would give you walls. Now I think you just need an outpost to start any cities and no colonizer units, which is quite good because it was very annoying when either another player, another ruler, or a neutral stack would pick off your colonizer. You usually had to send a unit with it to keep it protected. And I think just having your units be able to say, okay, this is where we're going to set up an outpost is going to like really level the playing field for newer players versus like veteran players and just against the AI in general. And this is interesting because it means that, you know, wherever your units are, you can just say, this looks like a good place to set up a city. And I think that's pretty forgiving. Right here, you can see a screenshot of a stack of, I think, 6 units, and they're trying to set up a outpost over Tranquility Pool. It's currently occupied, so if they do that there, they're not going to get the benefit of that extra research until they clear that node. And they did talk about how maybe this might not be the right place to put the city. It might make more sense to go one left or one down, because if you want, you can leave this open for a pretty nice province upgrade. When you have provinces surrounding the city, you can upgrade them to be special types based on what they have available to them. And Tranquility Pool gives you access to a research post and or a conduit, which are very powerful magic generating structures or a research generating structure. So yeah, no, it makes sense that you wouldn't want to go directly on this for long game benefit, but for short game, maybe you just want to clear that out and get that 20 research now, because I think right now they're making 60. That's a, you know, a 25% increase on overall research income, which adds up to quite a bit pretty quickly. Um, It costs 50 gold and takes 2 turns to make the outpost. After that, I think it takes 3 more turns and some Imperium to turn it into a city. Yeah, it says found a city as cosmic sparkles. That's going to cost 200 Imperium and 3 turns. So it does still cost quite a bit of important resources. The 50 gold to set up an outpost isn't massive, but the 200 Imperium to set up the city from the outpost, that's a pretty big investment. We don't really know the difference between the other options, but I think we can figure out what they probably give. For example, the watchtower, that's going to give you vision. I think like 9 tiles of vision around that center of the province, probably. Palisade walls would probably just make it so that there's more fortification in the center and that you've got more time to get over there and defend it if this place gets attacked. And a work camp might make it so that they actually produce resources there. I'm not actually sure. That's just what makes the most sense in my head based off of the other options available here. Um, Heroes appeared on turn 10 because in this match, that's when the outpost became a city. In Age of Wonders Planetfall, you would get a hero on your 10th turn, your 20th turn, and your 30th turn, which you could then recruit into your hero. It just happened to be a coincidence that that happened on turn 10. It's probably designed so it happens around turn 10 so that you're selling your first city and getting an option to recruit a second hero around the same time. Um, but yeah, it's not designed to be exactly turn 10. It's flexible. You might get it a little bit earlier or a little bit later. I feel like you probably could get it a little bit earlier if you invested heavily in trying to set up a city, which could probably um, pay off pretty quickly. So you might as well try to if you can. Then when they actually had the option to choose between heroes, they saw um, this list where there's 2 heroes from a independent city called Vortex, and then two heroes from the capital, which are labeled unaffiliated. They're just like, a little bit cheaper, a little bit less experienced, and I think that's to incentivize you to try and get along with at least your first independent city so that you can get some better heroes. Just in your list of options here when you go to get a hero, when you go to recruit a hero. And each of these heroes is going to come with its own unique trait. This one here gets Beast Trainer, meaning that you can recruit some animal units in the city that's being governed by the guy. Each of these heroes can go on a single city, I believe. I don't think they can govern 2. And some of the traits benefit the cities, some of them benefit the unit in combat, and some of them give them um, I think affinity, which is also kind of like economic related. It's similar but different. After that, we have how you can summon a sphere if you take Demolitionist. Seems pretty powerful. I really want to see what this sphere is and how strong it is. It seems like it's designed to destroy buildings and obstacles, so probably not a bad unit if you are trying to go attack some other player. I don't know if that's going to help you a lot on the defense, but maybe it'll help you like take care of some siege equipment. Cunning is, I think, something that I actually got a screenshot of. Friends of the Ogres lets you recruit troll units, which we actually got to see a few of towards the end of the stream. Pretty cool that they're willing to show that off. And Cunning is a unit deals 25% extra damage when flanking. So, you probably want to give this guy a single action attack so they can run around and flank some units for a lot of damage. And you may want to give them more movement if at all possible. I think there was, ways in previous games where you can increase a guy's uh, movement from 32 movement to 40 movement, allowing them to maybe travel another hex or 2 before attacking with their single action attack. Of course, you want to keep them relatively safe, but it's still a fun mechanic to play around with if you want to. Try and get a big alpha strike, a big initial bit of damage on the enemy. You can also integrate independent cities to get a new hero, so I think that could take you over the cap. I think going from 1 out of 2 heroes was what brought up the recruitment menu, but you can get, I think, 3 out of 2 by integrating an independent city or through certain events. So that is another way you can go about getting those heroes, and those heroes just come with what they give, what you get. You don't get to actually choose between them. They're just probably worth it because having extra heroes is always good. Um, Apparently, you can make new independent cities from the cities that you build, so that can be, I think, a way to generate heroes. I actually want to play around with that now that I think about it. All right, so we're going to look at the relationship levels with the independent cities, which they're calling pacts in Age of Wonders 4. The first one is the Pact of Cooperation. I think they got here around turn 7, and this says that free cities now have open borders. You can now move your units through there without that being considered like a hostile act that either ruins your relationship or opens up your units to being attacked by the independent city units. And you can trade things with them. I think you can trade gold for mana, mana for gold, and it says that you can do up to 2 resource trades, and magic materials can be traded at this level. So if they have anything like haste berries, or I think we got some screenshots of the other ones coming up later. Uh, I can't remember them all off the top of my head. If they have those resources, you can trade for them at the Pact of Cooperation. It doesn't take too long to get to that level. It looks like I think they were neutral. You can kind of see a little bit about it on the left. They were, I think, neutral not too long ago, and they just got to Pact of Cooperation. There's something coming up in the near future, and then like another pip at the bottom of that teal bar that's filling up. You can kind of see where you are using that shield icon right there. And it says in 2 turns you're going to get Pact of Loyalty. That has to be that gray bar has to be filling up this turn, and then this next turn you'd go, I think, to the Pact of Loyalty. I'm pretty sure that's what this interface is saying right here on the left. Um, if you want to, you could boost your allegiance to, I think, just immediately go up to the next level, or just to gain a little bit of allegiance. I think you're at 17 out of who knows how much exactly right now, but boosting the allegiance would get you to the next level a little bit faster. Putting in a whispering so will allow you to gain that allegiance just over time. I think that's 1 turn of allegiance gained just from the whispering zone. So I don't know what that is, but it looks like maybe 5 out of 50, or if that's 17, it looks like maybe a few points, maybe less than 5 allegiance for every turn a whispering stone is there. Um, right there, it's mentioning how the Pact of Cooperation gives you those benefits. Yeah, I guess the screenshot wasn't actually necessary. Um, and then Pact of Loyalty will give you something else. This free city will share its vision with you. Pretty important for decision making. They'll allow building unclaimed provinces. That's the ones that are adjacent to the ones they currently occupy. I don't know if the claims extend past just 1 hex. It might be 2 hexes away that they get claims as like strong for immediately adjacent and weak for 2 away. But I haven't seen too much on claims yet. You can also get units from them using the Rally of the Lieges buttons. I think it gives you 2 points, 2 drafting points, and maybe some units, but because these guys are the same type of units, I don't know if that's going to make a difference when it comes to the Rally of the Lieges button. And they will reinforce in combat against marauders. So if they are within, I think, 3 hexes of a fight that you engage, if they just have a stack around you, you can ask them to join you in the fight, which will be pretty useful if you're trying to clear out locations near their city. They're gonna have armies kind of wandering around, so planning that could be kind of tricky. Could be kind of hard guessing where they're gonna end up at the next turn. But if you see a situation, you can take advantage of it, and I feel like there must be some interactions with going to wars with other rulers and telling them, hey, I'd like to go take this city. Can you send units over that way? That's something I think that they talked about putting in the AI at some point in Age of Wonders Planetfall, and I forget if they ever got around to it. It's been a minute since I used the AI, since I played single player against an AI opponent. It looks like, yeah, in this turn 7, they actually went to 500 to 600 relationship status, and they went from no pact to cooperation and then to loyalty in 1 turn, which is kind of interesting that you can just skip right past cooperation that quickly. I believe this empire was built to be very friendly and be able to build those relationship statuses a little bit quicker as a result. So it may not be that everybody can do something like this, but it's pretty funny. It looks like they had the 450 from affinity, that's 200, 100 is from their alignment, the um, whether or not they're a good guy or bad guy, I think that's you just have good guy points. The Royal Origin also gives them another plus 100, and the Pact of Cooperation gave them the 50. So I think they may have spent a little bit of allegiance, um, a little boost to allegiance to get to loyalty. Is that what they pressed? Right. They're showing that there is a trade that they can do for special flower. I think there's something rain flower, and if they wanted to spend 10 gold, they could get that, or they could spend 8 gold to get 10 mana, or 20 gold to get some research. It looks like 10 research. Interesting. So those are some of the trades you can consider when you're at Pact of Cooperation and on your way to getting Pact of Loyalty. I think that you can just get more trades when you get up to Pact of Loyalty. And right, they were able to get a little bit more relationship status by, it looks like, creating a treaty. Yes, by doing this trade, that got them up to 600, which is a pretty big deal. The Rainbow Clover gives them 100, right? So having the Rainbow Clover made the AI like them another 100, and creating the treaty to get that gave them another 50. So they were able to get to 650 actually, and that may all on its own have boosted up the allegiance up to this point where they got the Pact of Loyalty, which we talked about earlier, and they're on their way to getting the Pact of Vassalage. So the Pact of Vassalage, that gives a little bit of your income, a little bit of the income from the free city to the Overlord. So it looks like 30% if I'm reading that correctly, as well as you just get the magic materials. You don't have to trade gold for them. They just appear in your inventory in your treasury, I guess. It also looks like that you're going to contribute to things to the Rally of Lieges. I don't think that's two more than the previous level. I think it's just saying you still get that, or maybe it is two more. I don't know if it would mention it if it was something that you already were getting access to. You get to also trade at the default levels. I think it costs more to trade for gold, research, or the magic materials, and now it's just, I believe, like essentially 10 gold for 10 gold, or the equivalent of 10 gold instead of just a little bit of an increase. After that, they're able to get to bonded vassalage relatively quickly. I think, yeah, it took them 4 more turns to get to vassalage, and then 2 more turns to get to bonded vassalage, and flourishing vassalage was turn 16. Pretty quick. To get to those points. It take a little bit longer for them to get to Supreme Vassalage, which I believe is the last one. Yeah, it only took them 21 turns to get their independent city up to, I think, the max relationship level, which seems pretty fast. Seems pretty good. Like they got what they needed to, and they played their cards right once they saw the options available to them. Yeah, bonded vassalage looks like you get 3 more things to the Rally of Lieges, so that'd be 2 plus 2 plus 3 points, I believe. We'll be able to double check that later at the end when we see the troll, when they recruit the swamp troll at the end of the stream. You also get a little bit more of the income. It goes from, I think, 30% to 40%. Yeah, that's interesting. It doesn't say you get 10% more of its income, it just says 40%. And the trade is actually cheaper now. So I don't know if that means that you can just trade gold for mana and then mana back for more gold, but that doesn't sound right, does it? There must be something else that I'm missing here. You can also see like the little shield moving across the allegiance bar. It looks like, yeah, it's got 2 more little pips after where the shield currently is. This looks like they just got to flourishing one, and then the last pip would be the supreme vassalage, where you can then start to try to integrate the city, which is not cheap. It looks like 250 uh, Imperium is the cost it takes to make that city yours. So it is something you can do, but I don't know how many heroes you can reasonably get out of it because of that Imperium limitation. You're going to use Imperium to build the city and then Imperium to get it back within your control, and there's probably other ways you can get heroes. Maybe as a Necromancer, defeating them in combat and then reanimating them is like a cheaper, more reliable way to get those guys. But yeah, I think we could talk about some of these modifiers here. Um, you can turn hostile ones peaceful with gold. Yeah, I had a feeling this had to do with vassals. This order trait will make it so you can get a Whispering Stone, so you can get more relationships going with either, I think, multiple cities, or if you put two in one, it might grow a little bit quicker. You can make it so that your cities give 10 more gold as tribute. That's not based off any percentage, it's just a flat 10 more gold, and that's pretty massive. If you've got lots of little vassals, then that'll add up very quickly. You don't have to take them past the first level. You can keep them and then just like negotiate with others, but you have to be careful because other people might try to integrate your vassal if you stop competing with them for that allegiance. Shock units and polearms gain experience a little bit faster. Yeah, I don't think that actually has to do with vassals at all, does it? This one does, though. This says that destroying an infestation or conquering a free city grants 300 relationship with all other free cities for 10 turns. So any city, it doesn't matter if you think that they seem like things that would get along if they have similar affinities. If you kill a free city with this active, it'll make it a lot easier to make the others into vassals. I guess it kind of looks like you're threatening them by taking out another free city. Um, Pretty cool. I think that's actually one a lot of people will end up taking so that they can have a a free city that they can get the benefits for being nice to, and also they can get the extra city in their empire from conquering another city. Seems like the best of both worlds, doesn't it? There doesn't appear to be a vassal cap type mechanic, so it can be worth making new cities and turning them into vassals, right? You will have a hero cap and a city cap, but independent cities both uh, don't count towards the city cap or the hero cap. You get both cities out of that interaction, which you get income from, and you get heroes, which I think can help you in your wars, but you just don't have direct control over them. Could be useful for draining your enemy's operational points, though, if they get attacked right by your vassal at this on the same turn you want to attack elsewhere. Um, I like the idea of that extra pressure. So yeah, these guys were hostile, I think, at minus 100 due to alignment being at war, and then all the other things kind of take it a lot closer to neutral, and wasn't very hard to get them to like um, the player. It just costs gold. It costs 216 gold. I think that has to do a little bit with how big that city is. It's not a small city by any means. I think it says 6 pops, and that means it controls, I think, 6 sectors all around it. So, yeah, I think we can move on to how you can track another nation's allegiance. There's 2 shields on here. One is the player and one is unidentified. If they knew the other ruler, that flag would be filled in, but right now it's just like a white empty flag because it's some unknown person. So what was really interesting is they easily turn things around and uh, yeah, ahead of that other person because they weren't using a Whispering Stone with this free city. I think they'd just done some quests or something to boost their allegiance, and just by I think one boost of allegiance and one Whispering Stone, they were able to get way ahead of this person. Yeah. All right, next we're going to be looking at the magic materials, which I know I've seen at one point before, either in a stream or one of the dev diaries, but when I tried to just search Google to research what we've seen, I couldn't find much on it. So I took all the images and put them, all the images that I could get with numbers in them, and put them here. The first one is Astral Dew, which when you get that inside of your empire, you get plus 20 world map casting points. Pretty big deal if you're summoning units on this map, but if you're trying to cast more spells, more damaging spells in the tactical layer, that doesn't make a difference. You get something different when you collect all 3 liquids. If you have Astral Dew, Archon Blood, and Tranquility Pool, you get another unique modifier. I don't think we actually got to see that one. I do think we did get to see the one you get for plants. If you have all 3 plants, I think I got a screenshot of that right here. Yep, if you've all 3 of them, you get plus 10 Imperium income. As you've seen in just this video here, Imperium is pretty valuable. Getting a little bit of 10 more income means that you can found an extra city every 20 turns. Okay, maybe not as useful as some things, but it adds up. It's a big deal. Having just a little bit of that will go nicely with like the upgrades you get on your wizards. How I think each upgrade gives you +5, so +10 is actually pretty significant there. Imperium is supposed to be kind of hard to come by, and collecting all 3 of these shouldn't be something that is too easy to do. I don't even know if all of these resources are guaranteed to spawn in a map. So if they are, it will make it so that maybe trading will allow you to get what you need more reliably. But if not, then you just kind of have to play it by ear and see what you can get a hold of. Next we have the Silver Tongue Fruit, which actually I think spawned in twice in this map. Not bad if you like getting the extra just immediate income, which is 10 food, and I think that's either production or draft. I think that's draft. That looks like a sword to me. So you can build units faster and your city is going to grow a little bit faster. This will also give you the ability to have your Whispering Stones give you more allegiance. So I think if you're getting 3 for just having your Whispering Stone in a independent city, then it would go up to 4. Just a pretty significant upgrade, if you ask me. It will allow you to make friends with the independent cities just that much faster, and it may be a part of why they were able to make friends with the independent cities as quickly as they were in this stream. The Rainbow Clover gives you a little bit of Imperium. Yep, 5 Imperium and 10 stability. So once again, Imperium is super valuable. It's about as valuable as 10 stability because, there's an option that gives you 10 Imperium when you annex it, and another one that gives you, is it 10 Imperium when you annex? No, it's when you collect the set. So it may be even better than 5 Imperium. 5 Imperium might be even better than 10 stability because it's the benefit for collecting something that's a little bit harder to get than just one of the parts. So you not only get the Imperium and the stability, you also get a little bit of relationship levels with all free cities and all rulers, making it easier to stay at peace and to make independent cities into vassals. We have the Tranquility Pool here, which is the one that was right next to the city that they wanted to make. This also makes it so when you just have this inside of your space, you get a 10% reduction to all knowledge needed to research spells. I think everything in a tome is technically a spell, so that should be all of the knowledge checks, unless there's something that I'm missing, something I'm forgetting here. And yeah, that takes us to our general tips. Things like if you wanted to, you can change to have your players start really far away from each other, or you can make it so you start really close together, and that will make the map the right size for the number of players that you have here. I think I talked a little bit about this at the top of the stream, so that's something we don't really need to spend a lot of time on. I just think it's a nice, cool quality of life change that should make it a lot easier for people to choose the map that they want to play on. I'm probably going with standard myself or small because I feel like shorter games are kind of fun. Um, Next, we had this little particle effect that you can kind of see on the rainbow. I think if you take unicorns, when they run around the map, they get a little rainbow following them. It's pretty fun. I like that idea a lot, and I think that it will allow people to role play a little bit more, to get more invested in their characters. Tom definitely seemed to enjoy it, and I think other people will as well. We actually got to see the Astral Echoes in action. They're these little white pips, and when you go over to them, you get a little bit of research and mana. Man, I meant to get a screenshot of how much research and mana. I think it was like 10 research and 20 mana or something close to that. It keeps track of the number of these that you have collected, and there is a building that you can get a benefit from based off of the number of astral echoes you have collected. I think if you have 10 astral echoes that you've collected, that would be like twice as much benefit as if you'd only collected 5, or maybe half as much benefit as if you'd collected 20. So it really incentivizes this empire to go out and scout and get there before any other potential mystics might get those same astral echoes. There's also other things out there that encourage scouting through different means, and I think that that's cool. That some of the nations um, will probably scout a little bit more than others, and others will be more based on building up their own space than figuring out what's around them. The mystics are going to probably want evoker abodes. They don't get workshops, so building that works out pretty well in the long run. I noticed they built that first in their capital and their secondary city for the mana income. If as your mystic, you're going to be casting a lot of spells in combat. Every time you do, you get star blades on your units, or I think you have to enable star blades to do that, and then you do more damage every time you cast a spell. So you're going to be wanting to do it pretty much in all of your combats. There may have been something about like if units die, you get more mana too in the further down the mystic line, but I could be remembering that wrong. Tom typically likes to take provinces that give gold first, something like a mine, even though it doesn't provide the boost that, say, this Evoker Abode needs. If you wanted to, you can make it cheaper to build by getting a farm. And I think he got talked into getting a farm to make it easier to build this and some other things. But he would have preferred the gold because gold is used for buildings, recruiting units, recruiting heroes, and upkeep. And it's just like every once in a while you run out of gold, and you just that's what you need to move forward in the game, and you have to wait a little bit of turns until that happens. So by getting a mine earlier, you can have a stockpile, and it'll take more time for that to become a problem. And when it does, it'll probably be a problem for less time. Another thing they recommend doing is if you're going to take Mystic, they usually don't have a lot of melee, so having a melee leader to support the other melee units will make it so they don't die as often. It sounds like one of the problems that Age of Wonders Planetfall had was when melee units were in a fight and you only had one or two of them, they typically would run ahead of everything else and just get themselves killed. And that could still be a problem in Age of Wonders 4 if you don't have a lot of melee units, but most factions do. It's just Mystics typically struggle because of that lack of melee units, especially on turn 1. You can always say, I want to build more of them and then have that support later, but turn 1 is a little bit trickier for Mystics. They also mentioned that because they have unicorns and they know they're going to get unicorns from the pull, that it would make more sense to have melee because melee does more on a unit that can teleport than a ranged attack. Being able to get closer to a unit and actually hit them with your melee attack is better than just being able to get better accuracy on a ranged attack, because of the chance of missing and reduced damage that comes from just range in general. When fire damage hit a obstacle after it missed an enemy, it actually caused fire, I think, on the hex that an enemy was standing on, which is pretty cool that fire can do that. It can create these little hazards across the map. And I'm curious if that spreads like the fire in that other fight they showed off in, I think, the last stream with the spiders. Because if it spreads, it's a pretty interesting thing that can just happen randomly whenever there's fire magic involved in a fight, and potentially abusable. I think I could see people just attacking all the obstacles around them to light everything on fire and just being like, all right, if you're gonna try and attack me, you have to walk through the fire now. And I don't know. I don't hate that idea. I think that sounds pretty cool. Arcane guards reduce resistance with their melee strikes. That's something very unique to them, making it so that your battle mages can actually do more damage if you use your melee first. Typically, you would want to use your range attacks on other units before charging your melee in, so that when the retaliation may trigger against your melee units, they take less damage. But it's actually kind of like inverse with mystics. You want to send your melee in first, reduce resistance, and then have your mages do a lot of damage, unless you're like taking advantage of Starblades, which yeah, these guys get attunement Starblades as I think one of the culture units. Soothers have this cool little heal that bounces. It does 20 points of healing on, I think, 2 or 3 units, which is pretty powerful. It just means that you need to keep your units that are hurt relatively close to each other when you want to heal them. You can always move one over, heal, and then have it use the rest of its movement to go somewhere else entirely. So there's some versatility in that ability. it's interesting that they actually have jumping heals and jumping damage. They mentioned that mystics get jumping damage, but that can be countered by lightning resistance, because I always found that was kind of broken when you would target an obstacle with jumping damage and then it would hit the enemy units behind it. I want to see more about that before I make any more statements about that, because it could be fine if you can't target obstacles, but if not, I don't know. I kind of would look to see that change a little bit. Um, Next, we have the Tome of Libraries. You get to see here a new tome. You get to see the Tome of Amplification, a tier 2 tome, which gives you some affinity, some extra casting points, and it looks like something called resonance fields. There's this skill here, Amplified Arrows, which is the jumping one we talked about. Yeah, this is the one that says 30% of their damage will go to another target within 2 hexes. So looks like it only jumps to 1 unit. Actually, yeah, that's not as bad as it could be. I'm playing a full jump to 2 units, which, yeah, could be kind of silly. If you target an obstacle and then it hit 2 units that were like supposed to be 10 hexes and 12 hexes away from your unit after they'd already moved, that units that otherwise would be out of range you could hit. So I don't know. This seems okay. Seems kind of cool. Now we have something about temporary summons. If you only have temporary summons in a fight, the fight is going to be over, which is not how I believe it worked in Age of Wonders Planetfall. I remember people using constrictors and Valkyries to stay in a fight and be able to use more operations, like spawning in a constrictor or spawning in a Valkyrie. Um, but we did see in this fight that when there was only a worm left over, which I think was spawned in by another unit, that the fight ended, which is probably better than allowing people to just keep summoning to keep themselves in the fight. It allows people to just get 1 unit in the fight and then keep summoning units to stay in the fight, and that seems like exploiting a mechanic more than playing the game as intended. But I don't know. It still fits in the like realm of this isn't breaking the rules. It's just kind of bending the rules. Astral Keepers are a pretty fun unit. I really like the eyes pointing in all the different directions. It sounds like all the Astral type units are slightly stronger than the other units of the same tier. Kind of reminds me of the Voidbringer units from, once again, Age of Wonders Planetfall. Um, but yeah, they fit that same rule where there's something that you can try to take on towards the end of the game and potentially will give you some really good benefits if you take them out. But yeah, what is even better is if you can get them underneath your own control. If you can get a unit like this in your control, you've got a big advantage against other units of the same tier. Like this tier 2 will just allow you to go attack another ruler who's maybe only got the tier 2s or around tier 2s, and just take advantage of these special mechanics. Like this guy has something called an Astral Blessing, an Astral Torrent, which I think are quite powerful, quite good. I didn't get a screenshot of them. I don't think they hovered over that at any point. As suspected, no respite means that you won't heal outside of your own territory, and you can go to your vassal's territory to heal. It was something that I was curious about how that worked, so I'm glad they got to show that off a little bit in this stream. Nature Tomes has a tier 2 tome called Tome of Fertility that allows you to restore the lands into grasslands and forests. And I believe if you do that, then the no respite would apply in those territories, but they may also be inside of your own realm if you're terraforming them. We haven't seen that, so I'm interested to see more about that. All right, so the next thing we have in our list is something that I just found interesting and has more implications than I initially realized. The map is actually a square. It doesn't wrap around. I think if you go to the right edge, that doesn't take you to the left edge, and if you go to the bottom, that doesn't take you to the top. In at least Age of Wonders Planetfall, maybe different Age of Wonders 3, you could go all the way left and it'd wrap around to the right. But if you went to the bottom, that was like a wall. You couldn't go past that wall. That was kind of like the southernmost point on the map. And it would make sense maybe if you were on the right side and you went to the bottom of the right, you would appear somewhere like else at the bottom of the map. But they didn't want to worry about that. They didn't want to worry about balancing the map like that. But this means that if you send units in all directions, that's less viable because eventually they're going to hit a wall that they have to turn around at, and they're much more likely to hit a wall that they have to turn around at because they can hit them in 4 directions instead of just two. But I think that that's okay because that means that you can kind of hit the wall and then rotate either clockwise or counterclockwise and keep finding locations. It just means that those locations are probably going to be further away from enemy players. That seems like something that you could take advantage of if you want to, but it will take some time for people to adjust to that new play style, that new meta. I also have the screenshot here showing off the general interface of what it looks like if you don't zoom all the way out. Once you go to this layer, you get a simplified icon for all the locations, making it a little bit easier to figure out what is where. Sometimes when you're looking at the strategic map, it can be a little bit overwhelming. There's a lot of colors if you zoom in just a little bit past this point. So having this simplified version should allow people, I think, to make plans a little bit better. It should make finding things like haste berries, things that give you that extra mobility, a little bit more easy and a little bit more reliable to take advantage of. Also, I think it'll help for like figure out what you've figured out was around you beforehand. If you're like, oh, there's watchtower over here, and then you went over to the side, zooming out to this will help you like re-find that watchtower. Um, so after that, we have spawners telling you how many turns you have until they start spawning in units. This says that this infestation will become active in 9+ turns. That's pretty good information to have, because if you didn't have that, you might just end up keeping units around guarding a city that you don't need to for 9 turns. It might make sense to actually send a second stack back in its general direction so that you don't have to build a new one to defend that location. Or you may want to try and actually clear the spawner before it spawns in something. So you send you're here to get there in 8 turns. It will allow you to decide, okay, I have to get here before 9 turns pass, because if I go clear this other location and come over here, I'll have to deal with 2 armies. And if they spawn the turn that you're able to attack them, it's pretty annoying. Um, so I think that that's awesome. I think this is also going to level the playing field, because this is one of those details that veteran players, they generally had that number in their head. They knew how long it took for things to appear, and newer players, they just kind of had to guess a little bit. It wasn't like publicly available knowledge, but it was something you could learn through experience. After that, we have the Mystic has this interesting skill called Experienced Leader, and it works similar to the Vanguard's passive experience gain, which I know a lot of people were not a fan of. They thought that it was a waste of a building, because you had to keep your units at a city, and if they were just sitting on a city, what were they doing? But the fact that this goes on a leader and applies to units in the leader stack, I think does make it quite a bit better, because that leader can then move around, give some passive experience to their units, maybe wait a turn to get a unit to rank up before engaging, while also healing. And yeah, and I'm sure that it isn't so great on higher tier units that require more experience points to get to the next tier, but you also have to consider that on lower tiers they're going to get to prime rank eventually, and getting 2 experience when you're at 40 out of 40 experience, it's not going to make a difference. So I think there's some interesting trade-offs on this. I'm not sure if I'm going to use it. Tom seemed to be a big fan of it, and I don't know. I think that he's pretty good at the game. I kind of respect his opinion on that, so I'll probably play around with it, see if I like it as well. Mystics can be a little bit squishy, at least in auto, partly due to the settings they were playing on. Usually you wouldn't lose 2 units here in a stack of what looks like, yeah, 6 of their units against 4 other units, but I think they were higher tier units. They kept resurrecting when they would die, so you have to be a little bit careful with them in that regard. I think, yeah, battle mages, they do a lot of damage, but they have the vulnerability of, yeah, if somebody gets close enough to them to do melee, they can really devastate them. I think Tom did something kind of funny and accidentally built like 4 Arcanus when he meant to build 1. So this may have been that stack. I think it was that stack. It definitely was vulnerable to certain strategies. I like the new combat history menu. I think when you used to click it, it would be hidden off to the right. It was pretty small. This both is nice and big and pretty cool to look at. The little like roughness around the edges really makes this feel like an old document and fits the setting quite nicely. Next, we have this event called Magical Fruit Infusion. This may have come about because of the relationship they had with that vassal and the fact that they had a special resource, or it could just be like an interesting coincidence. This first option says that you lose mana and you get some alliance with this city, and that will take them to the next pact immediately. It may be only 6 influence because that's what they need to get to the pact, or it could be that um, that alignment is set at 6 and it just happens to take them over that threshold. The fact that they say that it reaches that pact of cooperation immediately makes me feel like you get what you need to get to the level. So this could be worth it if you're further away from getting to the next pact. Um, but only 6 uh, allegiance. That doesn't seem like a lot. Actually, wait, yeah, 17 was what they had at like turn 10 or so. So I guess it could be worth it. After that, they have the option to take mana. It looks like no, you lose mana, lose 12, not mana, 10, 12 research for 6 turns, which is pretty significant if you're only making 60 research a turn. But it may mean that you only have to spend one more turn researching one of those lower texts than you would otherwise. This also gives you the same benefit, getting them to the Pact of Cooperation. It's basically 100 mana or 60 knowledge. I probably would pay the mana out of those 2 options because I don't know, getting more research is pretty valuable. Another event we saw is the Ride for Vengeance, which reminds me a lot of the Mega Bug Beetle, Mega Adult Mega Beetle that they had in Age of Wonders Planetfall, which had a bug beetle that turned into a monster and killed everyone. The text is like it feels like almost verbatim. It just kills all the people after this kid trusted it, and yeah, the it's funny. It's cool that they're making these little references to previous games. If you want to see my video discussing the descriptions in Age of Wonders Planetfall, I did spend like I think an hour just reading some of my favorite descriptions and talking about the fact that how they're not in Age of Wonders 4, but it seems like they have moved them into these events, which is cool. If you enjoy that kind of writing, that kind of lore, you can find them. They're just been moved over to different parts of the games. At least that's what it looks like initially here. These events seem like they're quite varied and numerous, so interested to see what other ones we haven't seen yet. Um, One of these options that you get will give you a new mount, a nightmare, which is I think like a demonic horse. Pretty fun unit if I remember it correctly. I think it might have given you lifesteal in Age of Wonders 3, but they ended up not getting rid of their unicorn because that doesn't make sense. If you're gonna be the magical sparkly unicorn people, why would you ride a little nightmare horse? Um, the other option I think we see here has something to do with draft. You can get like 200 draft, or you can get increased morale, quite a bit of extra morale on that unit in particular. I think it's only that unit, not like all the units in the stack. And you can get 290 draft in one of your cities, and I believe that's the one they took that they used to get like 4 arcanists, maybe 5 arcanists in one turn. Probably would have been better if they split it between some other units, but still good. That's a lot of draft. Like you can either make 4 of those lower tier units or maybe 3 or 2 of the higher tier units. That could be like a tier 3 unit right there. Just instantly build. So pretty valuable if you're trying to make units. After that, we have something about how you can get the healer unit from getting the Town Hall 2, which is something that will be pretty valuable given the no respite on this map. They went for it because otherwise it was pretty hard for them to heal. And I don't know if the healer gives extra like passive healing inside of their own territory, but that's how it worked in Age of Wonders Planetfall. So I think it makes sense to grab that in general, and it'll also keep units alive a little bit more in the fights that they're getting into. They met a leader who only had -5 relationship with them, and because they hate you at the beginning, that was pretty easy for them to get into the positive. All they ended up doing was giving 50 gold to get 50 relationship, and you can kind of see how this relationship breaks down in this tooltip here. They had plus 100 for alignment, positive first context plus 50. Um, Rainbow Clover is plus 100, just like the other relationship we saw earlier. Just met is -25. So when you just meet somebody, you have -25 for 10 turns, and they have an inherent dislike. I think that's just due to the affinities not being exactly the same. Well, no, I do see 5 Mystic and 4 Mystic, so maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. They seem to just dislike you, maybe based off of their own traits, and that's only going to last for 5 turns at -80 penalty to the relationship. They feel a little bit of threat, so they also have a little negative from that, just like by not being as strong as the other player. So all of that adds up. There's some that are only going to be there for a certain number of turns, and some that are just there for the rest of the game. Well, I guess if you lose the Rainbow Clover, that's not there for the rest of the game. It's there as long as you hold the Rainbow Clover. You can use boost to immediately complete a thing. I didn't grab a screenshot of this, but it was interesting. They had a building that required a farm boost to get the reduction, and they would done like 70% of the build. So when they clicked, let's take this farm sector, it just like got rid of that extra 30%. It may have been at 80%, and there may have been some wasted production that then they didn't need to spend on that building. If they'd gotten the boost earlier, then it would have been built before spending that extra, like, I don't know, 10 production or whatever it was. But yeah, it's cool that that's in the game, that you can choose to do that later. It doesn't, the boosts don't have to come first. I could see that from a programming being like a programming limitation, but no, it works in I think a very forgiving, fun way. Annexing a sector does build a road on that turn. You can't cancel, you can't raise. Yeah, Nader was playing a fall. If you said I want to annex this sector, it took a turn. Somebody could run onto that sector and like deny you that because there's a little like cloud above it, or a little like um yeah, a little bit of smoke coming up the center of the hex that indicated somebody was trying to annex it. So it's kind of annoying. Being able to just do that means, yeah, I think it's a nice quality of life change. And it also means that if you want to attract population, you can just build out your roads as you want to move using that method. Or you could use, I think, gold, which was something that I had later in my notes. We'll get to that soon. Yeah, I did think that the name Glittergrove did remind me a little bit of Glitterhoof, but I could just be like imagining that. This annexed, when you annex it, will give you a little bit of Imperium, mana, and stability. 5 Imperium, 20 mana, and 5 stability, as well as you get +2 mana per conduit in a city domain. So if you have a bunch of conduits, things that you could get kind of like over the Tranquility pools, you'll get a bunch more mana. From those locations if there's more of them on a city. I don't know if there's a limitation, like you can only have 2 conduits or 3 conduits attached to a city, but it'd be kind of cool if you could have like 4 of those, and then the Glitter Grove is also attached to it. I don't think Glitter Grove counts as a no, it says actually it counts as a conduit right there next to where it says +5 Imperium, 20 mana, and 5 stability. This structure can only be entered and fought in by one army led by a hero. I think exploring is going to be different than defending it from another ruler, but we haven't quite seen that. We haven't seen that kind of situation play out in streams yet. Next, we have a pretty interesting item called Wand of the Rising Undead. This says that friendly undead corpses can be revived with 60% of its total hit points. And then non-undead units can be raised as a zombie. So once you make a zombie, that can be resurrected in future combats. And when they resurrect, I think they resurrect with like 1 real HP and then the rest would be like temporary HP. So when you go to the strategic map, it takes a while before you can actually use that zombie or that other undead unit that you revived in combat again. But it's still pretty cool. It's still pretty powerful. Just being able to keep units around it allows you to keep your momentum. in general. So next we have this event called the Harbingers of um, of Misfortune. There's an option here for the Empire to lose 17 stability in a city for 6 turns. All free cities of the Empire will get minus 150 relations for the next. I think this is 18 turns. That's quite a long amount of time. You'll also get 16 knowledge per turn for 6 turns in one city. Well, actually, in both of the cities. I think in all of your cities you would get that. So this is saying no to this event, and it's actually it's quite bad. But you get some benefit from it. It allows you to get some knowledge a little bit faster. I don't know why you would take that. I think you almost always are going to taking this thing to kill the corrupted souls. They may be kind of hard to kill. That may be part of why you can deny it this way, or just deny it outright. Looking at this unit, it has 90 HP, 3 armor, 3 resistance, and 16 magic damage, or it might be 10 magic damage, 6 physical. So in general, not the weakest unit that you can fight. It can pass through, meaning yeah, that can be kind of hard to keep that unit away from other units. But I believe it's only the 2 units, not the worst situation. Because there's only so many actions they can use on 2 units before they're surrounded by your 6 or more. Yeah, this was an explore site, so you could bring like 3 stacks up against it if you really wanted to. Although I don't see why you would. Um, Another thing that you get is after you've completed this quest, you can either get 120 draft in that city, um, and or you can get yeah, it'd be 120 draft in both cities. That makes sense. Or you can get 90, no, 60 Imperium. Sorry, it's kind of hard to read these small numbers. And I believe the other option was you just get some production, which, yeah, I didn't get a screenshot of because I believe they didn't actually hover the mouse over it at any point. Um, by completing the quest, you will just simply get a reduction of 20% uh, less draft. Oh, I thought this was that last quest that we were looking at, Harbingers of Misfortune. No, this is Hearts of Iron. So this is a new one saying if you complete this, you get a global effect. All of your units cost 20% less draft, meaning you can build them a lot quicker. Instead of building 4, you'll be able to build 5 in the same amount of time. And this has, I think, a few options, that one of which is kind of like, denying this and getting the knowledge, but instead of that, I think we'd get, it looks like that's a draft type thingy um, situation if you say no to it. And yeah, after that, I think we're ready to look at the swamp troll. He's so cool. Yeah, you can hire him using Rally of the Lieges. I believe you can do something called Muster the Lieges to spend 140 gold on 4 recruitment points worth of units. You can do that every 15 turns, or I think you can just click on one of these buttons below, and I think that counts as one of your rallies of the lieges. They clicked on the swamp troll right there, and I think it was built that turn. It reminds me of buying NPC units in Age of Wonders Planetfall. It costs, I think that says 76 Imperium, or maybe I'm reading that wrong. Yeah, it's interesting. It says 150 gold followed by 76. I'm not sure which one's which, but what's really interesting about this is they get this regeneration and 2 really strong attacks. The regeneration means that they're going to be able to take a little bit of damage and stay in the fight. You can kind of tank a little bit more with them. Of course, you don't want to lose them, so you don't want to put them in too much danger. But putting them towards the front of your army seems like a decent maneuver. At, they will also heal 10 HP at the start of your turn on the world map. That might not get countered by no respite. I think that actually would work, but we don't actually get to see. I think this unit only gets to be in one fight at the very end of the stream. And it looks like, yeah, fire would stop the regeneration for 1 turn. So if you have the ability to set things on fire, you may want to attack this unit with fire. It looks like it has some natural resistances to maybe blighted damage and physical damage, but yeah, it has -3 fire resistance, which is kind of like it having 3 less armor, or actually not armor, 3 less resistance because you use magic to do fire damage. So it'd be almost like having 4 armor and 2 shields when you're doing fire type damage. I don't think you can do fire physical damage, although that seems like something that would happen. People light their arrows on fire. Don't know if that needs to be magical fire. Um, One of the abilities this guy gets is called Poison Bolts. That's 90% accuracy, 4 range, and it looks like that looks like repeating. That looks like the icon you get for repeating there. Um, this is pretty short ranged attack, but it does a lot of damage, 20 on each hit. It's Demolisher, Diseased, which I don't know what that means, but I've assumed it's like a damage over time or a reduction in resistance to that type of damage. Electrified is, I think, damage over time for lightning damage. Yeah, it looks like you do 16 blight damage and 4 lightning damage with this attack. So it makes sense that those modifiers would have to do with the blight damage channel and the lightning damage channel. It's not affected, no, it is affected by line of sight. It cannot be used when something is right next to it. It is magical in base. Yeah, that makes sense. The other ability they get is only a single action, so you can run to the edge of your mobility and use that. I don't think it's a full action. I think that uses 3 pips at the bottom of the icon when it's a full action. Um, and it does a bunch of damage. It does 26 damage. It's not as much as if you get to use all of your repeating, but you have more versatility when it's only a single action point. This is also Demolisher. It's very likely to apply Disease for 3 turns, and it's an AoE. It's one of the few AoEs that a unit can use that, as far as we've seen. It seems like maybe that's reserved for later tier things. It reminds me of throwing grenades, like the troopers in T1 Vanguard units. They had an AoE, but this is more powerful. It always hits. It's got range 6, so that's pretty cool. Um, you can keep your unit a little bit more safely if you use something that's range 6 versus range 4. It'll be further away from the enemies, which means it'll take more time for the melee to get in range and be harder for ranged attacks to hit you. After that, we have the ability to get plus 1000 mana. Am I reading that right? I think I am reading that right. That's a lot of mana. That's a lot of spells that you can cast, or units you can buy, or I guess units that you can pay for using upkeep as well. That's gonna allow you to support your magical units for a long, long time. You can probably go negative like 10 income for like what 15, 20 turns before that will really catch up and be a problem if you got 1,000 mana to spare. After that, we have something about how spells can be cast on the first turn of combat if you go down the Mystic Tree. That used to be something that you'd have to rely on a building for, but being able to just be like, okay, I'm gonna be Mystic focused, and you're gonna have to deal with spells a little bit quicker, means that you can really discourage people from attacking you. Having that advantage in combat is massive. Yeah, you can build roads using gold. This says that every hex that you fill using a army to build a road is going to cost you 3 gold for each hex. So if you're going to just cover 5 hexes with roads, that's 5 times 3, that's 15 gold. That's actually not a lot, and it can really do some really important things for you, like save you some movement. I think towards the end they were getting close to attacking wherever the Maze of Crystal is, but if they hadn't built a road, they wouldn't have been able to get there. But by building a road, it actually used their movement points more effectively. It's kind of like as they were building the road, they were using it. So instead of it being 8 points of movement, it was like 4 points. So they could, yeah, they just basically were able to move more effectively that way. Um, it mentioned something about auto retreat button. I don't know if that was just a joke or if that's something that's coming up in the game. So now we're ready to look at the Maze of Crystals. This was the event that led to the big fight at the end of the stream where they were reflecting damage back at the defenders. But typically when you do this fight, the defenders are going to reflect magical damage back at you. They just got lucky on their affinity check, which can reduce your affinity if you fail it. But yeah, most people when they attack into this, they're gonna have a lot of trouble if they use magic damage like Tom does and was using in this stream. So he got pretty lucky that he was able to turn that effect around on the enemy and not have to deal with it himself. I feel like if he had to deal with himself, he probably would have lost a few units more than just one, and he was able to not lose a single unit and barely actually take any damage because of this effect right here. Just made it so that the enemy units died a lot quicker when they were attacking. They were taking damage on their turn, and they were taking damage from Tom on his turn. Um, there is a way to make it so that you don't have to deal with this. I think it says you can spend 195 mana so that in the battle they only get Mirror Veil attackers, and that would be you, and that's a pretty big advantage. So I think you can either spend mana to turn that around so that you get the advantage and not the defenders, um, or you can take this dice roll basically based off of affinities, a 4 strength affinity, astral affinity check, and with success their attacks, the ambushers are able to reflect the attacks back onto the defenders, um, and battle with that. You enter the battle against those units. If you fail, then basically they still have the effects on themselves, and you lose some affinity, one astral affinity every turn for 6 turns. Astral Serpents are a pretty interesting unit that we got to see in the fight that become invulnerable when they take damage. So they're a pretty good unit to send into the fight early so that, after they take damage, they can survive another turn to deal a lot of damage on the next turn. And it's something that your enemy can't ignore. They're going to have to either move far away from that unit or just accept that they're going to take a lot of damage from it, which is interesting. I can't wait to see some more of the Astral units. I think we've only seen a small selection of them, and the higher tier units are just going to be so interesting to play against. Anyways, that was the last screenshot I have here. So yeah, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and all that fun stuff. Until next time, take care and have a good one.